You don't realize what you have until it's too late. That's what I used to believe. Until I found out how true it was. My name is Jack Thompson, and for the last 14 years, I thought I had everything figured out. A steady job, a loving wife, Sarah, and 2 kids. Life was simple. Well, that's what I thought. I never saw it coming. Not in a million years. You don't expect your life to shatter over something as trivial as a holiday gathering. But that's exactly what happened. It all started one chilly December evening. Sarah, sitting across from me at the dinner table, dropped a bombshell. "I think we should invite Steve to our Christmas dinner this year," she said, her voice casual, almost indifferent. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. "Steve?" I asked, trying to hold my calm. "Yeah, Steve," she said, smiling at the thought. "You know, my ex." I could feel the blood rushing to my head, my heart hammering in my chest. This was not the kind of conversation you expect to have over mashed potatoes. "Your ex?" I repeated, still trying to wrap my head around it. Sarah, the woman I'd been married to for over a decade, wanted her ex to sit at our dinner table on Christmas. I forced a smile, but inside, everything was unraveling. "I don't think that's a good idea, Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. She looked at me with that same familiar look, the one that had slowly become less and less frequent in recent months. "Oh, come on, Jack. It's just for the holidays. He's a part of my past, but we're all grown-ups here, right?" she said, as if it was perfectly normal. As if it wasn't a slap in the face to me. But I didn't argue. I didn't fight back. I let it go. For now. I didn't want to be the guy who made a scene at Christmas. But I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly what this meant. The distance between Sarah and me had been growing for months, and now, she was inviting the man she once loved into our home like it was no big deal. And the worst part? I realized, with a sinking feeling in my gut, that I wasn't even angry anymore. I was numb, but I wasn't going to let this go. Not now. Not ever. The next few days were tense. I kept my thoughts to myself, pretending everything was fine while Sarah made arrangements for Steve to come over. It was clear she was excited about it, and I couldn't help but feel more and more like a stranger in my own home. The holidays, which were supposed to be filled with warmth and joy, now felt cold, distant, and hollow. The Christmas tree in the corner, decorated with care, no longer seemed to hold the magic it used to. The lights flickered, casting shadows that seemed to echo the growing distance between us. I spent my days going through the motions, trying to focus on work and our kids, but the thought of Steve being invited into our home gnawed at me. It wasn't just that he was her ex, it was the fact that she seemed so nonchalant about it, as if this was just another normal part of life. But to me, it felt like a betrayal, an insult. Christmas Eve arrived, and the house was bustling with activity. The kids were excited, running around and playing with their new toys, and Sarah was in the kitchen, humming a Christmas carol while she prepared the meal. She looked beautiful as always. But there was something different about her, something cold in the way she smiled, a smile that no longer reached her eyes. I tried to push the nagging thoughts from my mind as I set the table and helped the kids with their stockings. But every time I looked at her, every time I saw her glance at her phone, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. She was texting him, Steve. I knew it. I didn't need to see the messages to know what was going on. The tension in the air was thick. The time came, and Steve arrived. I could feel my heart race as I opened the door to greet him. He stood there, tall and confident, wearing a smile that seemed too smug, too self-assured. He had that look about him. Charming, suave, the kind of guy who always seemed to get what he wanted. And there he was, in my house, at my Christmas dinner. He had no right to be there, but there he was. I tried to mask my discomfort with forced politeness, but I could feel the weight of it in every word I spoke. I could see Sarah watching him, laughing at his jokes, her eyes lighting up every time he spoke. It was like she was a different person, a stranger. I watched them, feeling like I was on the outside looking in. I felt small, insignificant, like I didn't matter anymore. As the night wore on, I could feel the cracks in my heart widening. Sarah and Steve shared private jokes, whispered conversations that I wasn't a part of. The house, which was supposed to be a home filled with love, now felt like a stage. I was just a spectator in my own life. Dinner was served, and I sat there, pushing my food around my plate, barely able to taste anything. The conversation continued, but I wasn't really listening. It was all just background noise to the thoughts swirling in my head. The laughter, The clinking of glasses, the sound of Sarah's voice, it all blended together in a blur. And then, just as I was about to lose myself in the emptiness of it all, Sarah turned to me. "Jack, what do you think?" she asked, a question that seemed too casual, too innocent. But I knew better. I knew it wasn't just about the dinner. It was about everything. It was about the fact that she was choosing him over me. "I think this is a nice dinner," I said, my voice steady. "But I don't think Steve should be here." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Sarah's smile faltered for just a moment, and I saw something in her eyes, a flicker of guilt, maybe, or maybe it was just surprise. She didn't expect me to speak up, but I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't the man who would quietly take this anymore. I wasn't the man who would let her walk all over me. I wasn't the man who would let her decide what our life should look like while I stood in the background, forgotten. This was my life, too. And if she didn't realize that now, she would soon enough. The night dragged on, and I could feel the tension building inside me. I had made my point, but I wasn't sure if Sarah truly understood the weight of what I had said. The dinner continued, and Steve seemed to settle into the evening like he belonged there, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny, looking too comfortable in my space. The way Sarah looked at him, it wasn't the same look she gave me. It was something else, something familiar, and it hurt more than I wanted to admit. After dessert, as the kids ran off to play with their new toys, I found myself alone with Sarah in the kitchen. The sound of the dishwasher humming in the background felt like the only thing grounding me in that moment. I stood by the counter, my hands resting on the cold granite, trying to steady my breath. Sarah walked over to me, holding a glass of wine in her hand. "You're being distant," she said, her voice soft, almost playful. But I could hear the edge in it. "Is this about Steve? You know he's just an old friend." I looked at her, my eyes locking onto hers. "An old friend," I repeated, trying to control the anger that was bubbling up inside me. "An old friend who gets invited to Christmas dinner? An old friend who gets all your attention while I sit here, pretending everything is fine?" Sarah's smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly regained her composure. "You're overreacting, Jack. It's just dinner. It's not a big deal." But to me, it was a big deal. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was about everything that had been building up between us for months. The silence. The distance. The way she had changed. The way she had stopped looking at me the same way. The way she no longer cared. "No, Sarah," I said, my voice steady but firm. "It's not just dinner. It's everything. It's the fact that you've been pulling away from me, that you've been turning to him, and that you're so blind to it that you think I won't notice. But I do." The silence between us was thick. I could feel her hesitation, but I wasn't going to back down. I had let her get away with this for too long. I had let her think that I was just going to accept whatever she threw my way. But I wasn't that man anymore. "I'm done pretending, Sarah," I said, my voice quieter. Now, but still resolute. "If you think you can just keep me around while you play this game, you're wrong. I deserve better than this. And so do you." Sarah didn't say anything. She just stood there, her glass of wine trembling slightly in her hand. For a moment, I thought she might finally get it. But then she just shook her head and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there, alone. I watched her go, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of clarity. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I wasn't going to be her backup. I wasn't going to be the guy who waited around while she figured out what she wanted. I wasn't going to play second fiddle to anyone, especially not to a man who had no place in my life. I knew what I had to do, and as I turned off the kitchen light and headed to bed, I knew that things between us would never be the same again. The days that followed felt heavier with every passing minute. I couldn't shake the image of Sarah walking out of the kitchen that night, leaving me standing there with the weight of everything we had built together suddenly crashing down around me. I tried to focus on work, tried to keep busy with the kids, but the feeling of being invisible in my own home was suffocating. Every time I looked at Sarah, I couldn't help but feel that distance between us grow wider. She was there physically, but emotionally, she had already checked out. It wasn't just the Christmas dinner. It wasn't just Steve. It was everything. The way she barely acknowledged me anymore. The way her attention seemed to always drift elsewhere. It all came to a head one evening, just a few days after Christmas. Sarah was in the living room, scrolling through her phone, as usual, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. I walked in, my heart pounding in my chest, and stood in the doorway, just watching her for a moment. The silence between us was almost unbearable. "Sarah," I said, my voice quiet but firm. She didn't look up. "Sarah," I repeated, a little louder this time. She finally glanced up, meeting my gaze for the first time that day. "What?" she asked, her tone sharp, as though I had interrupted something important. "We need to talk," I said, my words hanging heavy in the air. She sighed, rolling her eyes as if this was just another one of those conversations she didn't want to have. "Not now, Jack. I'm really not in the mood for one of your talks." "Too bad," I said, walking over to where she was sitting. "We're talking now." She put her phone down, annoyance flashing across her face. "What's the deal with you lately?" she snapped. "You're acting like everything is falling apart when it's not." "It's falling apart because you don't see it, Sarah," I said, taking a seat next to her. "You don't see how much you've pulled away from me, how much you've stopped caring." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop her. "No, don't even try to deny it. I'm not blind. I know what's been going on. The texts, the calls, the way you look at him. Steve, I mean. Don't try to act like I haven't noticed." Sarah's face hardened, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe. She opened her mouth again, but I cut her off. "I'm not going to sit here and pretend everything is fine anymore. You've made your choice, Sarah. And I've been sitting here waiting for you to realize what you've been throwing away." She stood up, her hands trembling slightly as she crossed her arms. "What do you want from me, Jack? What, exactly, do you want me to say?" I stood up too, walking toward her. "I want you to admit it. Admit that you've been letting him into our lives while I've been pushed to the side. Admit that you've stopped caring about this marriage." She looked at me, her expression conflicted. For a moment, I thought she might actually say something, but instead, she just shook her head and turned away. "I don't know what you want me to say," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. I watched her, my heart heavy with disappointment. "I want you to realize that I'm not the one who's been hurting this marriage, Sarah. You've been pushing me away for months, and I'm done being the one to fix it. I'm done pretending." She turned back to face me, her face pale, but her voice was stronger now. "What does that mean, Jack? Are you leaving?" I didn't answer right away. The words felt like they would rip me apart, but I knew I had to say them. "It means I'm done being your backup. I'm done being the one who gets ignored while you go off with someone else. I'm done being the man who gets second place in his own marriage." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there, staring at me as if she didn't recognize me anymore. "I don't know who you are anymore, Jack," she whispered. "I don't know if I even want to." The words stung more than I expected, but they were the truth. I knew then that things had changed, and there was no going back. I wasn't the same man I used to be, and I wasn't going to stand by while my life was falling apart. I turned and walked away, knowing that whatever happened next, I had finally taken control of my own future. The next few days felt like I was walking in a fog, but there was a new clarity in my mind. Sarah and I had reached a point of no return, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to chase after her approval. I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself, no matter how hard it was. The house felt colder, more empty than ever. The silence between us was deafening, and every glance she threw my way felt like it was measuring me, trying to figure out if I would break. But I wasn't going to break. I had made up my mind. I couldn't keep living in a lie, pretending everything was fine. The kids noticed the tension. They always do. Our daughter, Lily, came to me one evening, her small hands tugging at my sleeve. "Daddy, why don't you and Mommy talk anymore?" she asked, her big brown eyes wide with concern. It was the question I had been avoiding, but I couldn't lie to her. I crouched down, my hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes, adults have disagreements, sweetie," I said, trying to sound calm, but my voice betrayed me. "But we still love you very much, okay?" She nodded, though I could see the confusion in her eyes. I hated that I was putting her through this, but at the same time, I couldn't keep pretending. As the days went by, Sarah and I hardly spoke. When we did, it was about the kids, about schedules, but never about us. She was distant, cold, and I couldn't figure out if she was trying to convince herself that everything was fine or if she had already made her decision to let go. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I still wanted to save this marriage. I had spent so many years trying to keep things together, trying to be the man she wanted, but in the process, I had lost myself. And now, standing here, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. One evening, I found myself at the kitchen table, staring at a picture of the two of us from years ago, when everything felt so simple. It was from our first anniversary, and we were both smiling, unaware of the cracks that would form over time. I ran my finger over the frame, feeling the weight of what had been lost. I had tried. I had given everything to her, to our family, but now it felt like all of that was fading away. And then, I realized something. I wasn't going to let myself be the one who faded away. I wasn't going to be the man who stayed silent, who accepted a life of being ignored and neglected. I wasn't going to keep giving and giving while receiving nothing in return. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. I knew it was time for a change. I wasn't going to wait around for Sarah to wake up and realize what she had. I wasn't going to keep putting myself last. It was time to take control of my life, no matter what. I spent the next few days focusing on myself, working harder at my job, reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in ages. I started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done in months, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something for me. One afternoon, I went to the local coffee shop and ran into an old colleague, Mark, who I hadn't seen in years. We caught up, and I found myself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. It felt good, freeing even. I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away. As I walked back to the car, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't sure what the future held for me and Sarah, but I knew that I was ready to face it, whatever it might be. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. I was going to take charge of my own life, whether she was with me or not. It had been weeks since that night, and Sarah and I were like two strangers living in the same house. The emotional distance between us had only grown. The tension was thick, but neither of us was willing to address it directly. Every interaction felt forced, as though we were both waiting for the other to make the first move. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I wasn't happy, and neither was she. The truth was undeniable now. I had spent so much time trying to fix something that was already broken. One night, as I sat in the living room alone, I realized I had been waiting for her to come to her senses, to make the decision to repair what we had, but I had to face reality. I was the one who needed to take control. She wasn't going to make it easy for me, and I couldn't keep waiting for her to suddenly change. The next morning, as I prepared my coffee, I saw Sarah in the hallway, her face pale and tired, the weight of everything between us hanging in the air. She didn't speak as I walked past her to grab my coat, but I knew she was feeling the same thing I was. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. "Jack," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "are we just going to pretend everything's fine?" I turned to face her, my heart pounding in my chest. For the first time in a long while, I looked at her, not with anger, not with resentment, but with a sense of clarity. "No, Sarah, we can't pretend anymore," I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. "I've been pretending for so long that everything is fine, but it's not. We've been drifting apart for months, and I can't keep pretending that I'm okay with it." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and regret, but also something else, acceptance. "I know," she said quietly, her shoulders slumping as though the weight of her own realization had finally hit her. "I've been so wrapped up in everything else that I didn't notice how much I was pushing you away." It was the first time in a long time that she had acknowledged the distance between us. The words stung, but they were also a relief. We had reached a point where we couldn't keep pretending, and I knew it was time for both of us to make a choice. "Sarah," I said, my voice softer now, "I can't do this anymore. I'm not asking you to change, but I can't keep living in this limbo. I need to move forward, whether that's with you or without you." She didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, looking at me, the silence stretching between us. I could see the pain in her eyes, the realization that we were both at a crossroads. "What are you saying, Jack?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "Are you saying it's over?" "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but I know I can't keep waiting for things to magically fix themselves. I've given everything I have, and I don't know if I can give any more." Sarah nodded slowly, as if understanding the weight of my words. "I don't know what the future holds either," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "But I think we both know that we can't keep living like this." That was the moment I realized that no matter what happened, I had finally taken the first step. I was no longer waiting for someone else to fix things. and I was ready to take control of my life. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only way forward. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like I was finally starting to make decisions for myself, not based on fear or insecurity, but on the belief that I deserved more than the life I had been living. The weeks that followed felt like I was walking through a haze, trying to find my footing again. Sarah and I had spoken, but nothing had really changed. The silence between us was still there, hanging heavy in the air. I had made my decision, but I wasn't sure if she had made hers. It was as though we were both waiting for the other to make the next move, but neither of us had the courage to take that step. It was around the beginning of the new year that I started to realize something. I was done waiting. I had spent so much time trying to fix things, trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away, and it was draining me. I didn't want to keep living in this emotional limbo, where everything was always uncertain. So, I made a choice. I had to take control of my own life, even if it meant moving on without Sarah. It wasn't easy. I still cared about her, still loved her in a way, but I had to face the reality that the woman I married was no longer the same. The woman who had once stood by my side, the woman who had once shared my dreams, was now a stranger to me. I didn't want to hold on to something that was no longer there just out of fear of being alone. The fear of the unknown had been paralyzing me for months, but now I was ready to face it. I started making plans for my future. I signed up for a few courses at a local community college, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. I started focusing on my health again, hitting the gym every morning before work. For the first time in a long time, I was doing things for me, things that had nothing to do with Sarah, and it felt liberating. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat down with Sarah in the living room. It was the first time in a long time that we had been alone together without any distractions. I could feel the tension building between us, and I knew it was time to have the conversation I had been avoiding. Sarah, I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion, I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us, about the future. She looked at me, her expression unreadable, but I could see the faintest trace of uncertainty in her eyes. I know we've been drifting apart, and I don't want to keep pretending that everything is okay, I continued. I'm not asking for things to go back to how they were. I'm asking for us to finally face the truth and decide what we're going to do moving forward. Sarah didn't say anything at first. She just sat there, looking at me, her fingers nervously tapping on the arm of the couch. I could tell she was processing what I had said, but I wasn't sure if she was ready to accept it. I don't want to keep living in this uncertainty, Sarah, I said. I can't keep giving and giving while I get nothing in return. I deserve more than this, and so do you. She finally spoke, her voice soft but tinged with sadness. I don't know what to say, Jack. I've been so caught up in everything that I didn't even realize how much I was pushing you away. I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know if we can fix this. I nodded, understanding her pain. I don't know if we can either, I said. But I can't keep living like this. We both need to make a choice. The words hung in the air between us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally being honest with her, with myself. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. We didn't have the answers yet, but at least we were finally facing the truth together. Whatever happened next, I knew I was ready to move forward. I was ready to take control of my own life and stop waiting for someone else to make it right. The days after that conversation were heavy, and the silence between Sarah and I was deafening. We hadn't made any decisions yet, but the tension in the house was undeniable. Every time I looked at her, I saw someone who was trying to hold on to something that had already slipped through her fingers. I wasn't sure what she was waiting for, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to make my move. My days at work had become a blur. I found myself distracted, my mind constantly drifting back to the conversation we'd had in the living room. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. I kept telling myself that I was doing the right thing, but deep down, I was scared. I was scared of being alone, scared of losing everything. One evening, a few days after our talk, I came home to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. The kids were at their grandmother's house, and for the first time in a while, it felt like we were truly alone. I walked in, and she looked up at me, her expression unreadable. I could feel the weight of her gaze, the silent question that had been hanging between us for weeks. Jack, she said softly, I've been thinking about what you said, about making a choice. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I don't know what I want anymore, she continued, her voice shaky. I've been so lost, so focused on everything else that I didn't see how much I was hurting you. But I also don't know if I can fix it. I don't know if we can fix it. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been waiting for her to say something, anything, that would make this whole thing easier. But nothing about this was easy. I don't know if we can either, I said, my voice quiet but firm. But I can't keep living like this. I've tried, Sarah. I've tried for so long to make this work, but I can't keep pretending everything is fine. She looked down at her cup, her fingers trembling slightly. I don't want to lose you, Jack, she whispered. But I don't know how to fix what we've broken. I sat down across from her, my heart heavy with the weight of the decision I knew was coming. I don't think we can fix it, I said. I think we've both tried, and we've both failed. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's time to let go. She didn't say anything for a long time. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could feel her pain, her regret, but I also felt something else, a sense of relief. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I could finally take control of my life. So what happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now, I said, taking a deep breath, we make the choice. You and I both. I can't keep living in this uncertainty. I need to know if we're going to move forward or if we're going to let this go. She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with tears. I don't want to let go, she said, her voice breaking. But I don't know if I can stay either. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had always believed that love could fix anything, but now I was realizing that sometimes, love just isn't enough. I think it's time we both move on, I said finally, the words feeling final, like a chapter closing. She nodded again, her face pale, and for the first time in months, I saw a flicker of relief in her eyes. It wasn't the end I had hoped for, but it was the end we both needed. I stood up, walking toward the door, and I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had made my decision. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally moving forward. It had been a week since Sarah and I had come to the painful decision to part ways. The house felt quieter now, emptier somehow. The weight of the silence that had once felt so unbearable was now strangely comforting. I had been living with that constant hum of tension for so long, but now it was like a fog was lifting, and I could finally breathe again. The kids were adjusting, and though I could see the sadness in their eyes, I knew they would be okay. I was determined to be okay, too. I found myself thinking about the future more than I had in a long time. I had spent so much time focused on saving a relationship that had already run its course, and now, I needed to focus on rebuilding myself. I started getting back to the things I loved, things I had put aside for years. I began reading again, picking up books I had left unfinished on the shelf. I joined a local group for weekend hikes, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. The feeling of the cool air against my skin, the sound of my boots crunching on the dirt trail, it was a reminder of what I had been missing. One afternoon, as I sat in the park after a long hike, I saw a couple sitting on a bench, laughing together. They looked so at ease, so happy. For a moment, I felt a pang in my chest, but it wasn't sadness, it was hope. It was the realization that I could be happy again, too. I didn't need to rely on someone else to complete me. I was enough on my own. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat down with a glass of wine and thought about the journey I had been on. The last few months had been difficult, but they had also been transformative. I had let go of the person I thought I was supposed to be and started embracing the person I was becoming. There was a sense of peace now that I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I had learned that it was okay to let go, that sometimes the best thing for both people is to move on. And as I sat there in the quiet of the house, I felt a sense of gratitude for everything that had led me to this point. It hadn't been easy, but I knew that this was only the beginning. There was so much more ahead of me, and I was ready for whatever came next. I didn't need to know the details, didn't need to plan every step. I just knew I was going to be okay. And that, in itself, was a victory.